Welcome to this episode of TheSquare. Today we're talking about the value of branded environments and what that even means. And I'm really excited to have David Rose and Micaela Fangue here with me. Micaela, you're a senior designer, and David, you're a project manager on the branded environments team, which is headed by Paige Terrell.
Right.
So I want to have a conversation about what all that covers. But before we get into that, Micaela, tell me a little bit about how you became a designer.
So I've always been creative-minded. It started with music, and
what instrument did you play?
I played saxophone.
Nice.
And I also sang. I did a lot of productions in high school, musicals and such.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that kind of evolved into more of the artistic drawing focus sort of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And when I made the decision to study architecture, one of the most impactful classes I had was a survey of architectural history, which to some is probably really dull and boring, but I loved it and soaked all of it up. My professor, at the very beginning of the course, he quoted something that stuck with me, that painting is art that you look at, and sculpture is art that you look around, but architecture is art that you live and work in.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It really struck a chord with me, and I just dove in, learning about all of the different architectural history, and what stuck out to me is the stories that people would inscribe on the sides of their buildings, like Greek temples, the cave paintings in France. People are always documenting and telling their stories across human history in the architectural medium. And when I started learning about branded environments, that just seemed a natural spin-off in modern day of people telling their stories in their workplaces, in healthcare facilities, all aspects of where they live and work.
So you were talking about how they inscribe it on the sides of buildings, and I am far from an architecture student, but one of my bucket list places to visit is the Gaudy Cathedral, just because of all the little intricacies and the details that are kind of carved into the wall and the stories.
Absolutely.
David, tell me a little bit about how you got into design.
So when I was growing up, I was always interested in sketching and drawing. I did that so much as a kid. And as I got older and learned a little more about really what architecture and design was, I think what inspired me to pursue this path that I'm on now is I always loved how you can visualize and communicate ideas. And there are so many great architects that do that so well.
Yeah.
And there's a few. I mean, I think the go-to in my mind is Bjarke Ingels, who does incredible architectural diagramming. And so that was always something that I found so appealing, especially to create those and explain ideas without using words.
Yeah.
And that's really what diagramming or architectural diagramming is. I think what I have always been so interested in is the blend of graphic design and architecture together. And the notion of environmental graphics is where I'm most passionate. And our branded environments team does exactly that. And so
I got to ask, what does environmental graphics mean?
So it is taking messaging or storytelling and visualizing that in the three-dimensional space. And a lot of times people think of a simple idea of just a logo on the wall. I mean, that's the baseline level of environmental graphics. But there are so many other avenues for that.
Are environmental graphics and experiential graphics basically the same thing?
They can be, but there is some differentiation. In my mind, environmental graphics could just be imagery or color and vibrancy in a space, but experiential graphics is how an individual can interact with the space.
Got it.
And that can be through messaging or through digital means, how people can evolve a space through their own motions or change the dynamics of a space.
I remember when we were filming part of the Toyota project, there was, and I don't know that you can tell me the technical term, but there was the the graphics that are on the triangles, that as you come around it, it reveals part of an image, and then when you get to the other side, it's a completely different image.
That's a really common installation that we do in a lot of projects. It's a lenticular wall.
Lenticular wall.
And the cool part of that feature is the duality of being able to have two messages, and often they're two messages that combine together and are counterpoints to each other.
Well, and again, that experiential part of it, I love that just by the simple fact of me walking, I'm in control of my experience, right? And you're taking something that is inertly static and making it dynamic by the way people walk past it. Micaela, is there a different mindset you have to think of when you are designing graphics for this versus other types of design?
I absolutely think so. We have to look in the whole environment, as is in the name. You aren't looking just two-dimensionally at something. You're looking at how people are moving through it. You're looking at so many more angles of how people approach things than just print media and other traditional, what people would think of as graphic design.
So what's the goal?
So I know a lot of times we have heard this in visioning sessions with some of our clients, which are introductory meetings as to why they want to do this or what they're interested in. And what we've heard before is that a lot of times clients say that right now the space doesn't feel like us. And that's always such a lightning bolt for us to know that graphics and environmental branding can play such a pivotal role in making the space feel like them. And so in terms of the why, I think that's what we're providing, how we make the space feel or represent the company or our client. And we do that through the storytelling component, the messaging, and visualizing what they represent in the space.
So it's something that really kind of can both express and support a culture at that point. It's something
it's like a physical manifestation of their culture and their identity.
Which is weird because it both, like you said, it's physical manifestation. It comes from it, but then it reinforces that idea in this kind of circular way.
For sure.
What do you think are some misconceptions people have about branding and environmental graphics?
I think people often think it's just limited to a logo behind the reception desk.
Right.
And that it might be a patterned wall covering down the corridor. But there are really limitless possibilities of what environmental graphics and branding could do to transform a space.
Tell me about Baylor Scott and White.
So Baylor Scott and White, one of the really cool features we did that was above and beyond traditional graphics was a suspended chandelier in the lobby space.
So right in here.
Yes, this one here. The cool thing about this, it's composed of hundreds of glass rods, some of them painted, some are just transparent. It creates this sense of lightness and airy quality that draws you in.
That's cool.
Yeah. So when you're first approaching the office building, you can see the logo, and then when you are actually in the vestibule itself, you can look up and also see the logo. So it's translated in two different
and again,
planes.
It's experiential because you're controlling that experience.
Right. Yeah, it's an opportunity for like surprise and discovery. You see it one way, and then you get up close and see it a whole other way.
I guess surprise and discovery probably play a pretty crucial role in the idea of experiential graphics.
For sure. And I feel like it's not just with graphics alone. We're not siloed in our discipline. We work heavily with other groups within Corgan. But with representing brand specifically, it's not just graphics. So there's other avenues. We look at the interior design finishes of a space. I mean, an individual's or a company's mark or their color palette can exist within the textiles, within furniture or carpet tile or paint finishes, or even hardware, like the door handles can have some essence of the company. So, and there's so many avenues with how brand can be represented in the space, and it's not just with applied graphics or a wall covering. There's so many other possibilities there.
I'm curious, if most companies, I'm sure, is just as protective of their brand and their brand standards as Corgan is. Sure. Is that a challenge that you have to run into? Is getting people to think about their brand and the representation of their brand in a different way?
It sometimes can be. A lot of times people are really focused on sticking to their brand standards, which are created for a print graphic setting.
Yeah.
So you have to work with them to think a little bit outside of the box. Luckily, as more and more companies are embracing branded environments and incorporating in their space, people are starting to have that framework from the beginning, which allows just a lot of thinking out of the box of different ways to manifest that brand.
So I guess the next question is, so what? Like, why is branding and graphics essential?
I think it's essential to make a place feel more familiar and more comfortable, to make it more than just the traditional stuffy office building, to make it a place that you want to wake up and go and spend your work day. Especially with this past year of so many people working at home, it's something that will draw you back to the office and just be an experience throughout your day to take a break and explore and find something in your building that you didn't see there before. It's a conversation piece. It's a wayfinding, placemaking aspect of how to direct people to meet you and have that collaboration between different people.
There's a sense of belonging that it fosters, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I think too, because humans just benefit from that interaction with others, that the work from home scenario, while it has many advantages, the one major disadvantage there is that you're not around people. And so having a space that can help with that collaboration and provide that that messaging within the space and bring people together, I mean, that's one main value as to why branding exists. We've
talked in other episodes where, it's undeniable that the pandemic has an effect on, the value of place, specifically with, office buildings and whatnot. And you hear about the tech companies are like, oh, we're all work from home from now on. And I have a feeling it's a pendulum swing. I've already seen it kind of started swinging back the other way.
Sure.
And it seems like experiential graphics, like even like the discovery, like you were mentioning, you don't get that at home. There are some benefits to working at home. So fluid, hybrid situation is great, but there's that discovery and that collaboration that just doesn't happen at home.
Right.
Yeah.
What about, is there a possibility as companies are thinking through experiential graphics and branding, is there a component of this that helps with attracting new talent? So not just for the people that are in the culture they have, but bringing new people in?
Yes. I think one of the main things we're asked to address is the tour path in a space. Clients are always thinking about how they're going to navigate new talent through the space and strategically placing these graphics and this artwork to attract that talent and leave a lasting impression that they'll go home and reflect upon, and it be a company that they want to join and be a part of.
A part of our design process too is looking at different user experiences. So for a specific client, we'll look at who will be attending the build, or who will be coming to the building, whether that's like board members or new recruits or employees, visitors. What is the experience per person, and how do we maximize their their experience through the space that
for sure
benefits each one of those groups? Because you're not targeting the same person for every, throughout the whole space. So you need to think through who's coming there and what they're looking for.
I recently got to see some of your handiwork at the KDP building. I was touring it, and the fixtures and even like the glass sculpture above the stairwell was really cool.
Yeah, that project was so much fun to work on. It was translating soft drinks into a space, and we really we focused on the aspects of carbonation and those different physical attributes you don't right off the bat think of for soda and coffee. And so that bubble sculpture was one way that we brought that to life, of as you're moving up the stairs, it's like you're moving up a beverage glass, and you ultimately arrive at the bubbles at the very top.
I think what is so beautiful about that element is, yes, it's a glass sculpture, and it's a such a unique experience climbing that stair. But behind the scenes, there was so much involved in making that happen, and I think that's what people might not realize when looking at it. Obviously, we had to design that space, present it to the client. Once we got their approval, then we had to find, through assistance through other consultants, but we found a glass sculptor to make samples for us to review. So we saw probably 20 different samples of glass that we selected to represent those different bubbles. And then we had meetings with different architectural consultants, our structural engineer, to make sure that the ceiling had the adequate structure to hold that in place.
Sure.
We had to meet with our lighting consultant to make sure that the sculpture had the right spotlight to make it as dramatic as possible.
Yeah.
We had to meet with HVAC consultants to make sure that there wasn't a duct blowing air at the sculpture and potentially knocking those things
Having
around.
it flying all around.
Yeah. So
there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
For sure. So, and I mean, but that's what we do. We coordinate to make sure that these things are in place and work the way we design, so that when you see it in person, all you see is the beauty.
That's got to be, it's fascinating as a designer. I mean, because especially with a client like KDP or some of the others that you've worked with, to be able to kind of dream up whatever you want, and then even before they sign off of it, get 20 different samples of seeing that dream kind of become a reality. It's got to be a really cool feeling.
For sure. Yeah, to see the process come to life is one part that I love.
Yeah.
And, to be involved in making something as cool as a glass sculpture come to life, I mean, that's what makes it so fulfilling.
I think it's traditional to think of potentially graphics and even experiential graphics with a client like Keurig Dr. Pepper in an office building. But you guys have been doing it in some pretty untraditional spaces like data centers and various other places.
Yeah. That's been really fun to branch out, because that's a whole different side of the brain to work with.
For sure.
Data centers especially have always been these blank white boxes. The focus has been the data, not the walk through the data hall.
Mm-hmm.
And so now a lot of data center clients are competing with one another and competing for who is going to host that data. And so again, coming back to that tour path, how do we make that an experience so that when people are touring the space, considering using that particular client, how do we make that lasting impression that they'll reflect upon and want to move forward and host their data there?
I think one of the things that skeptics might think is, okay, so you do a cool graphic or sculptural element, and you do have those sense of discovery, but what's the psychology behind it, or what's the actual science behind leading to a greater sense of engagement and satisfaction?
So I know on quite a few of our projects, there is an aspect of placemaking that we integrate to our work. And what that means exactly is how you define the space a certain way so that you have reached your destination, or you have moved to a space that is distinctly different from where you were before. And you see that, I mean, the most iconic place you see that is at theme parks, and how you change from one zone to another. For sure. I think we do that in a more poetic way in architecture with, the changing of materiality, or, like a change of a color scheme. Maybe like for wayfinding or signage, maybe we allocate a certain color per floor as one strategy. But there are these perceptive cues that we use from our toolkit to really emphasize placemaking, to make sure that space has a unique feel, and it's another layer to that engagement within the space that visitors or employees will get from being in the space itself.
I feel like there's probably a lot of intuitiveness, a lot of intentionality into how intuitive a space is going to be.
For sure.
So what about collaboration and community? Because that's a big piece that's missing from the hybrid workflow, right? Is if you're not able to be around other people, you're not getting that collaboration and community at its fullest. Can this have an effect on that?
I think that one of the ways our work really creates opportunity for collaboration is by reminding people of why they are there that day, and taking a company's core values and bringing it beyond that stereotypical teamwork poster that you see everywhere.
The kitten hanging on the line.
Yeah, exactly. Taking it beyond that and looking at ways to visually express that. So going back to Baylor, Scott, and White, finding ways to express the patient's needs for the administrative worker, and creating thoughtful moments such as we had a stairway in the cafe, a very common space that people are in every day, having their meals, working together, and expressing the value that patients have for those workers by displaying quotes directly from patients of how Baylor, Scott, and White had impacted them and transformed their lives. And so the everyday worker can see those quotes every day and re-inspire themselves of the work that they're doing and the work that they're doing with others.
And that their work matters.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You mentioned a sense of place a little bit earlier, David, and I'm curious, it feels like that would be a greater challenge for you all as designers because there's a variety of places now. You know, it used to be just the office, and now you have the office, you have home, you have potentially, you know, other places in the office where people are in community spaces or collaboration spaces. So what role does environmental graphics play in that?
Well, I think a lot of companies are changing their work strategy where you do like heads down work at home, but collaboration happens at the workplace. That value of bringing people together is emphasized when you're together in person and you can exchange ideas freely and not interrupt people on conference calls and, oh no, you go first. No, you. Like, that is disruptive to the collaborative process.
For sure.
And so to have the value of being in person is key, especially in our design profession.
What is it about experiential or environmental graphics that takes a place, you know, if you were in a normal building and maybe they haven't talked to you guys yet and it's just you've got the right paint colors and you have, you know, a logo on the wall. What is it about experiential graphics and environmental graphics that take the person inhabiting that building, whether it's a visitor or somebody that works there day in and day out, past that to give them, you've mentioned this earlier, David, a sense of place, to let them know that they've arrived?
So what we're focused on is always trying to showcase that company's values, what they represent. And we're not trying to do that in a promotional way. You know, this is not marketing on the wall.
Slapped up on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, employees don't need to see that in their workspace, but really analyzing their overall experience from the comfort of their chair to how they navigate the building itself, making sure that that's stress-free. Overall, we're trying to create this very distinct, memorable experience, and doing that through a variety of ways, but mostly through, or trying to look at environmental graphics as a way of representing some of that.
Sure.
Is where we come into play.
With the idea of more hybrid working, is there something with a virtual experiences that you guys have seen that is important in the environmental and experiential graphics?
Lately, there's been such a high priority on a digital presence and representing a company digitally through their website, through social media. What the look and feel is digitally is so important nowadays, but it's important to also use that same standard in the physical space and make sure that if companies are putting all this attention digitally, to not forget about the workplace and where people are going to go once the pandemic is over. You know, hopefully it's ending sometime soon, but you never know. So
making sure that feels consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotcha. Last but not least, is there a client, or maybe not a client, I won't put you on the spot for that, but is there a type of project you want to do you haven't done yet?
Yes. For me, I would
Micaela?
love to work on a museum project. I
Really?
think that is just bringing everything that we do together because it's focused on a tour, it's focused on user experience, it's conveying information that people haven't had before, and it would just be such a way to bring all that I've learned so far together.
Everything together. What about you, David?
Oh gosh, I think something that I've always been, I really like the outdoors, and I've been really intrigued with landscape design and specifically like cactus and succulents. So to design like a cool outdoor park that focuses on, biology and what is the scientific word for plants?
Botany.
Oh, that's good.
Just something that has this lens of the landscape and connecting to the landscape, but done through graphic design, I think could be something really cool.
I love that. I think that's incredible. Well, thank you both so much for being here and kind of walking us through all those differences. I'm really excited. Hopefully you'll get to do those projects that you mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about experiential or environmental graphics, make sure to check the description below, and we'll see you next time.